What's up, everybody? This is Damon at Radical Normal. I have a snake wrapped around me. She's somewhere. That's the way times are right now. Um, we haven't come to you for a long time. I am in Pasadena, California. Damon Amir Scranton. Emilio Maxwell Cersei is in Brooklyn, New York. Love to New York and New Jersey, all the weather that's been happening there. We have a new episode. It's still a long coming. It's about middle school. Paula Latier is principal of Fort Greene Preparatory Academy in Brooklyn, New York, out by Maxwell. She says hello. She's not used to being on camera. We have a new episode that has been a long time coming. Paula Latier is a principal at Fort Greene Preparatory Academy in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. She's been a middle school teacher and a principal for a long time. And she has a lot of really wise things to say about middle school, kids, teaching, and also wolves and their role in Native American mythology. Fort Greene Prep is the wolf pack. Go wolf pack! So I sound like a Frenchman. Hopefully you'll enjoy this episode. There aren't a lot of bells and whistles in terms of pictures and videos, but you will like. Cheers. Enjoy. Say bye, Orlando. Bye, Orlando. Let's go back. I started recording before you got on.
Oh, but it didn't take? Didn't stick?
Well, I guess you have to say yes.
I see. Hang on one second. Hey, have fun. Enjoy your week off. I won't be calling you.
Is that Damon?
That's Damon.
Hi, Damon.
Letitia's saying hello.
Damon, I finally get to go on vacation.
She says she's finally going on vacation.
Enjoy.
Ooh, so exciting.
I'm going to stop in my video's office and get that information. I called her.
Okay. If anything comes up, you could call me, but I'm not going to bother you.
Okay, thank you.
Enjoy. She worked really hard this summer. She did a great job.
I know she did. I worked with her. I can't believe we just lost the first 5 minutes of that. How did you know when you wanted to do what you do?
You mean principaling?
Well, we're going back.
Oh, okay. So from the time I was very young, I wanted to be an artist and I wanted to live in New York. Those were the two things. It was very clear. And then they went together, right? So I wanted to be an artist in New York. Not just an artist, but an
Yeah.
artist in New York. I wanted to leave my hometown and move to New York.
Where was hometown?
Hazleton, Pennsylvania.
Rural?
It's a city, but it's a very conservative, white immigrant town. At least it was. It's changed since then.
I know one of my dear friends is from Lancaster.
Yeah.
So
It's a little different in Lancaster, but yeah, Pennsylvania is an interesting place.
it's very diverse. So your husband builds boats.
Yes.
You talked about that. And you build sculptures.
Well, I used to. I haven't built sculptures in probably 15 or so years.
But how did that lead
No,
to-
more than that. 20. My God, I'm so old.
No, don't even
It's like 20 years now. It's 20 years since I've legitimately made a fine art sculpture.
Yeah, that's my life now. 25 years ago, something like that.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Never said that. But how did that lead to principling?
That's a really good question. So, I never even considered working in the field of education. I wasn't interested in it, and flippantly would, even say, "Oh, I'll never be a teacher." That's the first thing. Never say never, because usually that means that's what you're going to end up doing.
Yeah.
I also said I would never be an administrator. So I have stopped saying I will never do things because it brings them into being, evidently. After I left, so I told you I studied fine art and technical theater in undergrad, and then I went on to Pratt and I got my master's in sculpture. And then while I was getting my master's in sculpture at Pratt, I ended up getting a job in the Brooklyn Navy Yard working for a film production company way before Steiner Studios was there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the precursor to Steiner Studios. And we kind of watched the development of Steiner through the company that we were working for at the time. It's actually where I met my husband, at the same studio. And so I did art direction there, managed the art department, for several years. And then after I graduated, I ended up, weirdly, first working in a photography studio, kind of doing like it was a strange job because she did catalogs, but she did catalogs of things like little posed bears in like settings. And so like there was I would make costumes for the bears and I would help set up it was interesting. It was actually it's a fun job. And then from there I ended up in the fashion industry, and I worked in the fashion industry doing things like, setting up photography shoots, ad campaigns, doing brand packaging, helping with PR. So I was doing like that whole aspect of like a couture level company work. It was a newer company. And in the process of doing that, I contacted Pratt and I said, "You have a fashion department. We'll take some interns. Is there anybody that needs an internship? We'll bring an internship." So I brought in a bunch of young people from Pratt, and I felt very responsible for these kids because, number one, it wasn't a paid internship. So essentially they're paying to go to school and then they're working to get experience, right?
Yeah.
It was also my alma mater. So I graduated from that school. So I felt a kinship there. And they were being asked to do things that I thought weren't worth at the time, $50,000 a year you pay to go to Pratt. Like go get coffee or make photocopies or, put files together or run a delivery. And there's this whole kind of idea, I think, about people paying their dues and like having to do grunt work. And you know what? I still go get coffee for people and make photocopies. Like, I don't think that should be relegated to like, this kind of servant class of a person in your organization. So I had a really big problem with that. So I kind of took over the mentorship of the young people in this company to make sure that they were being given appropriate tasks. And some of that was really just helping the people who were in charge having the imagination to see what they could potentially delegate to these young people to take off their plate and actually add value. And so I spent a lot of time kind of negotiating those things. And then one of these interns in particular, who ended up becoming a lifelong, very good friend of mine, who I'm still friends with today, when she was doing her graduation show, she wanted to have sculptural elements as part of her show. And so she asked if I could teach her some things. And so I spent some time in her studio helping her kind of do these things. And it was actually her. She was the one who said to me, Paula, you're the best teacher I ever had. Have you ever thought of going into education? And so that kind of started a conversation that I had never really considered previously. I was never going to go into education, but I was becoming very kind of disillusioned with the New York art scene because it's very fraught. It's very political. It's not for everybody. And even at that time, I had a very inclusive kind of mindset, especially around art and giving access to art for people. Often the sculptures that I made were interactive. They were meant to be touched. I was showing at an exhibit in the Lower East Side, and I had an interactive sculpture like that. And kids from the neighborhood came in and they wanted to, young kids with their mom, like stroller baby, little kids. And they wanted to interact with it, and the gallery owner was like, no. And I had a problem with that, right? I understand the way that the system works, but if an interactive sculpture that is exciting young kids and they want to touch and explore, they can't do that. It's like Brancusi's sculpture for the blind being in a plastic box and you can't touch it anymore. It's
Right.
like you're disempowering the message of the artist and the reason why they're making work. And so this idea of preserving things because they're precious and putting them in a tier that's unreachable, that and the fashion industry, is that way too. I started to rethink, what the heck I was spending all my creative energy. I am a workaholic. I will work 16 hours a day without being asked. It doesn't matter what the job is. I think that's just how I move. So if I'm going to be investing this much of my time and energy into something, like what is the purpose of doing it?
Mhm.
And so after my friend, made this suggestion, you're riding the subway. It's the late 90s. And everywhere you look, it's like teaching fellows, teach for America, become a teacher, right? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to explore this. I'm going to see what I could do with this. And so I did. And, the funny thing is, and this is kind of my lot in life, I was ineligible for every alternative teaching program. Ineligible because I had a master's degree. You actually cannot get a seat in those programs if you already have a master's degree.
Yes.
So I got in through the back door, but then I had to pay out of pocket to make up all the classes to get my certification. Plus, none of my student loans were forgiven. So like all of the perks that like lure people into like becoming teachers, none of them applied to me. And I've seen like, at this point in my career, like upwards of 100 teachers who've cycled through the city getting all this free stuff, worked in the city for 2 years as a teacher, and then left the field forever. And here I am 20 years later, I had to pay for it all myself. So I think that's like a little endorsement for alternative teaching programs and their merit.
When we go to Dartmouth in Hanover, we're doing one of our site-specific pieces on a sculpture, which I'm looking really forward to because we get to climb on it and bang on it and make percussive sounds.
It's going
And
to be
it's-
fun.
Why middle school?
Well, I think some of it was, it's like I believe that the universe kind of directs you where you're supposed to go,
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this answer. I'm sorry.
right? So I get into this. I have to go into this certification center, and they tell me like what I'm eligible to do, right? And initially, they said, well, you can be a generalist in the elementary school, something called a common branches license. And I was like, all right, yeah, whatever. Right. And I went to the Marriott in Brooklyn to these massive hiring halls that they would have at that time, like
Yeah.
literally like 400 schools with tables set up. And you just go through. And they originally wanted to certify me for art, which makes sense because I had my master's degree in art, and they wanted me to be this elementary art teacher. So I go in, and I didn't apply for the art jobs because I'm like, the art teachers are the ones to lose their jobs first. Like there's no sustainability to this actual job line. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to go in for English. I'm going to be an ELA teacher. That's what I'm going to do. But I got given an offer, and they did this thing where they would write you a little ticket, which was a ticket of commitment. And this commitment was from a school that wanted me to be an art cluster teacher for an elementary school. And I thought, you know what? All right, I'll take it. I'll do it. Right. So I went to this hiring hall maybe the end of June. And it was mid-July, and I had never heard from the school. So I'm like, okay, well, I gotta pick up the phone. I gotta see what I'm doing here. And they're like, we don't know who you are. We didn't offer you a job. We don't have a job for you. What are you talking about? Right? And this is like before, I really understood how all this stuff works. So I'm like, how could I have this little piece of paper? They're like, oh yeah, but that was pending budget, and we don't have a job for you. I'm like, crap. Well, that's a problem. So I ended up going to this office it was before the districts were set up the way they're set up now. And I think it was like Region 32 or so. I can't even remember what it was. And they were trying to see if they could help me through a pathway to get me this English 7 through 12 license that would make me a little more marketable. And they said, well, go to this school. This school is doing interviews now. And the school was Philippa Schuyler School for the Gifted and Talented, which was a middle school in Bushwick. So I went and I walk in, and I see on the bulletin boards all of this like beautiful artwork, because it was a school. It was an arts-based school. So there's all this artwork. There's, they have a dance program. They have a theater program. They even at the time, they don't anymore, but they even on the 4th floor, they had full like wood shops and everything that you needed to really, do it right. And I was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is where I want to work. So I went into the office and I met with the Principal Millie Boyce. And she was like, there's just something about you. I actually think that you're the right kind of person for middle school. I want you to have this job, right? And I was like, all right, I'm going to work for you. And it was a real job, and I got hired there, and I worked there for 3 years. Unfortunately, Millie retired after my first year, and the school wasn't the same after she left, which is why I left. I think I would have, if she was still the principal, I think I would have still been there, because I really respected her and I really enjoyed working with her. And the school was a great school. There's nothing wrong with the school. Everything that I needed to learn as a new teacher, I was able to learn there. Yeah. And I rose very quickly as a teacher in the school. I was well respected, and I got great results with my kids. It was a wonderful experience. The only problem with the school for me, which ultimately is the reason why I left, was that it was a screened school. So in order to get into the school, you had to test, you had to be high performing. And if you didn't keep your GPA up or you didn't fit into a very specific behavioral box, they could ask you to leave and you would have to go back to your zone school. Now, when Millie hired me, she was very clear. She says, I'm hiring you to work with the kids the rest of my teachers can't work with. And so there were, something like 14 or 15 classes across a grade. That's how big this school was. And they were ranked. So if I was teaching 7th grade, 701 was all your level 4s, your top kids, right? And 714 was the kids that already have one foot out the door. Like they're ready to go. And those I taught, I think it was 7, 13, 14, and 15. Those are my classes. And they were like, I had 36 kids in a class.
Yeah.
70% of them were boys. And every day I was getting a phone call. Miss Latier, we have this kid that we'd like to transfer into your class. Always a boy. But I loved it. They were great. I never had a problem. I never had a discipline problem. Often these kids would get put into my class as kind of last ditch effort. And then they would be mad at me because they would end up with a 96 in my class. And all the other teachers are like, well, we're failing them and we can't get them out of the school unless you fail them too. And I'm like, I can't fail him. He did a good job.
It's bringing back memories for me. I finally taught 5 years full time at Fort Greene Prospect Hill Academy in Cambridge, and it was the switch to middle school that did me in. I couldn't handle the girls. Actually, I had a better rapport with the boys. The girls just ate me alive.
Middle school is really, really tough. And it's funny, when the chancellor visited a couple of weeks ago, she talked to me and AP Cotton, and she said, we were both middle school people. We've been in middle school our whole career. And she's like, well, clearly you're nuts. Like, you're the crazies. The crazies are, all the crazy people are in middle school. And, I've worked with so many different kinds of people, and most people do middle school for a minute until they get their high school opportunity, right? And I had my high school opportunity. I could have stayed in high school. I ended up as an administrator of a 612 school. I could have done high school. And when I left that school, they were like, why don't you do a high school? And I said, no, I want to do middle school. And for me, the thing about middle school that I personally love is that it really is an act of becoming. Like the entire 3 years is about becoming, right? There's still this kind of wide-eyed wonderment and silliness and openness of little kids.
Mm-hmm.
But enough self-reflection and questioning to allow you to start really digging in with kids around the deep stuff. I think where people get in conflict with middle school kids is that in our rawest version as adults, we are middle school kids, right? Because that's the onset of, I don't feel comfortable anymore. I'm questioning who I am. I'm doubting myself. Will I be good enough? Do people like me, right? Middle school is really the place where those thoughts become. And then we have to work really hard to either put up a facade, fake it till we make it, go to therapy, work through it, power through it, like whatever it is that gets you to the other side of that, you go through in high school and college, and then sometime towards the end of your 20s, maybe you're in a better place, right? It's a very slow journey, but the origin of it is in middle school. And so if there is anything that could trigger you. It's still in your personal being.
Yeah.
Middle school kids will trigger it.
Yeah.
And if you can't laugh about what these kids are doing, it can become very personal very, very quickly. And I think a lot of adults just don't want to look at the things that sometimes middle school kids make you look at. The other piece of this is high school. The reason why people want to work in high school, once you make it to the end of 10th grade, you're basically telling the world, I'm going to graduate high school. I'm graduating high school. I am in. I'm in. So 11th and 12th grade are a cakewalk. Like
I have a whole treatise to send you. I swear to God, I've mapped this out. Middle school, like Lord of the Flies. 9th grade, Barren Wasteland of Return. 10th grade, second semester, got to get your stuff together.
Yeah. So, so it's just an easier gig in high school because with the exception of 9th grade, which is middle school again.
Yeah.
The kids are already in it. Like they're like, all right, I'm going to do this. And 11th grade is really the sweet spot because anybody who wants to go to college, like that's your year, right? So that's an easy gig. And kids also at that age have developed enough to understand how to engage with the teacher in a way that's productive, right? Like they're not going to just provoke teachers for the sake of it anymore. They want their grades. They know how to do school. They're in it. They're going to make it through. It mostly, that's what it looks like. But middle school kids don't know any of that.
No.
Right? They don't know why they're sitting in those chairs. They think they're ready to be adults. They still want learning to be fun, but it's also now hard. So unless you like hard things and you think that's fun, it's not fun. And that, again, requires the adult to be a very creative thinker to think, oh, how am I gonna trick these kids into wanting to be here today with me? And so I think for me, and this has been a really circuitous, long, drawn out explanation, and I apologize. I think for me, because of my background in the arts and because of the kinds of things that I was trying to do with my art, often my work was really about getting people to engage in things. And art in and of itself, especially fine art when it's just you, all you're doing every day is getting up and solving problems. I mean, I never knew how to build anything I was building. And my husband will attest to it. Most of my stuff would fall apart. I had to get somebody else to figure out. I would have these ideas and I'm like, oh, this would be really cool. Let's make this happen. I don't know what to do. So every day was about, well, how do I get this to happen? And that's literally what middle school is. You have to be able to say to yourself every single day, well, how do I get this to happen? And you have to be just as curious and just as engaged with everything. And it doesn't matter. Everything is middle school curriculum. Oh, I saw something on the internet. I'm going to tie it to my class. Oh, I had a conversation with these kids. Tie it to the class. Oh, I saw a movie. Tie it to the class. Oh, this television show. Oh, walking on the street art. Oh, whatever it is, it's your curriculum. And so if you're just going in saying, I'm teaching social studies, this is westward expansion, you need to learn this because it says so. Nobody's going to buy that. And you can do that in high school. Right? But in middle school, you're creating art every day. You're looking for the sublime.
Well, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and the 6th graders almost brought me to tears. Sure. And I left class one day saying, I'm going to go outside. I need to cry. I'm going to walk around the hallway. And the kids were like, what? And when I left, Andrea said, is he really going to cry? And she said, he's a very sensitive person. And they all ran to the door to see if I would cry. And I came back in and they were like, are you okay? Are you okay, Mr. Damon? Everything all right? And I was like, yeah, everything's great. I didn't cry. And that's what it took to get them to care.
Well, the other thing, I think that people often don't understand about middle school, and this is just kind of how my brain works. Um, every day is a new start. Like
Oh
you
yeah,
literally you cannot hold on to anything. It's like dog brain.
yeah,
It's just in the moment. So like if you bring up something that happened 3 days ago that really upset you, to them it no longer exists. It
no,
literally isn't even there. So like if you keep talking about it, you're the jerk. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
100%. What's with the wolf pack?
You mean why do we choose a wolf as our mascot?
I mean, do you have a thing for wolves?
I do like wolves. I think wolves are great. There's
You were very passionate about the wolf pack. I'm just saying.
well, if you study kind of like Native American lore and mythology and legends, like the wolf is a very important kind of mystical being because it is the representative of the union between an individual and a group, right? So the strength of the wolf is the pack, and the strength of the pack is the wolf, and there is this symbiotic relationship where you must be your best as an individual, and you must care for yourself, and you must, reflect and improve and take time for yourself because you will then add that to your community, and your community will be strong because of all of these individuals who have added their best to this group. It's really to me it's an embodiment of utopian society, right? It doesn't exist. And then when Native American people were destroyed, the wolf was vilified, right? And so we have all this counter mythology about how evil wolves are. And, if you know anything about environmental conservation, especially in the United States, wolves are a lightning rod. And there are certain political parties that are like full on, like we have to annihilate the wolf the way that they annihilated the buffalo. And it's all about preserving only certain groups of people. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff tied up into wolf mythology that is very, very important to me. And I also think a very good model of, if you have to have a symbolic representation of what you want your community to feel like, that, wolves are very good creatures to look at.
When we go to Dartmouth to do the show, we're working with this guy who is a teacher in the Native American Studies program at Dartmouth. He's a Benaki tribe, and he was talking to us a lot about code switching and how he talks to different people in different ways depending on who they are, just in terms of how he says words like Abenaki or Abenaki. So I'll be thinking of you when we're up there.
Sounds fascinating. I wish I was going. I want to go to Dartmouth.
I can't wait. It's gonna be fun. They've been
That's
there
fun.
like 2 or 3 times. Lisa, well, Amanda's stuck in Canada.
I know. She's never getting out.
No.
But at least her family got to visit. I mean, they did open up finally.
Yes, and Jonathan and Heather went up there too.
Yeah.
Who make the best teachers? Do you think?
It's really, I mean, I think that's a complicated question because I think people come to teaching in different ways, and it really depends on, it depends on what metric you're using, right? What metric of best. And I've seen, different versions of really successful teachers. I mean, there was a math teacher in my first years of teaching at Schuyler. There's a math teacher. She's so mean. I mean, she was so mean. And she ran her class with an iron fist. And I mean, like, I used to get nervous just walking past the classroom. This lady was as serious as a heart attack. And, the kids would leave her class at the end of the year and they just loved this woman. And it wasn't like she was giving hugs and kisses. Like maybe she'd give you a little wink at the end of the year. Like there was none of that relationship stuff going on there. She was just, that was it. She had high expectations. You absolutely can learn math and you absolutely will learn math in this lady's classroom. And they all did. And so there was a real appreciation at the end of that, I think, from anybody who sat through it, where it was like, oh, thank God. Like this thing that many, many, many Americans, like is the bane of their existence. I don't have to do that anymore because I had this teacher who literally beat it into me.
Right.
Right. And there's and so I remember as a younger teacher really watching that dynamic and being like, sometimes it's all about the content and it's all about like just doing everything that you can to get kids, even if it's scaring the crap out of them, to engage in this content, because as soon as they get a little bit of success, that sets in motion a series of events that allows them to become more and more confident, and then all of a sudden I can't statements become I can statements. So that I always use that as a little bit of a touchstone when I think about this stuff, because I think that there's been a shift in the 20 years that I've been in the business to like this idea of social emotional learning and relationships and connecting with children and honoring culturally diverse perspectives. And I embody that and I believe in all of that. However, children will not learn content if you don't set high expectations for content and demand that they attend to the understanding that they can do things, right? Our job as teachers is to make sure that students, children, understand that you absolutely can do things. No matter what you think, no matter who told you what before, no matter how many times you failed, this is possible for you, and I'm going to help you find your way. If people can get into that conversation, that's what makes the best teacher. But the caveat to that goes back to what I was saying before. If you're teaching ELA and you never read young adult literature or read at all, you're not an ELA teacher. You're getting a paycheck. And you may even be going through some of the motions. But you'll never really inspire children because you're not inspired by it. Right? We are what we repeatedly do. Right? If you come to my house, you'll find everywhere in every corner of my house, including the back of the toilet, woodworking magazines. That's what my husband does. That's what he thinks about in his free time. He doesn't just go to work and think about it then, and then it's done. When he's on Instagram, those are the things that he's, following. When he gets a chance at the TV, when my daughter's not monopolizing it, that's what he's doing. I think that what makes a bad teacher is when we think it's just a job the same way, being a checker at a grocery store or, like this whole idea of like clocking in, clocking out. It is not that. It is not. It is something that you have to be in your head thinking about it all the time, because if you don't love it and if you're not seeing it three-dimensionally, the children won't either. And that's why I think we're in a mathematical crisis in the United States, because we have all of these people who have become math teachers who don't love math, don't think about math in their free time, and maybe weren't even that good at it in school.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. If you don't love what you do, then you need to stop what you're doing, because
Correct.
Your children are not going to be reaping benefits of it.
Yeah, I love teaching. There was never anything funner to me in my life. I can say that. I will say it all day, every day. When I retire, I will go back to teaching.
You said funner.
I did. There's nothing funner than teaching. There's nothing more fun than teaching.
Fun. Talk to me for a tiny minute about partnerships and how important they are at Fort Greene Prep, outside artist partnerships.
Partnerships are extremely important because of two things, right? So the first thing is schools are communities, and my school in particular is a very small community. If you have 200 teachers and 10% of them are people who want to go above and beyond and run clubs and do this and do that, that's actually a pretty good amount of people to be running like extended projects at your school.
You have 20 teachers, right?
Right. So if I have 20 teachers and 10% of my population wants to do that stuff, that's only 2 people.
Yes.
And 2 people cannot do a chess club, a chorus, a theater program, a debate team, a dance team, a robotics team, a this, a that, right? It's not humanly possible. And so what happens then to the children if these things aren't being offered, right?
Yeah.
And you can't keep mining the same 2 people for everything, and the other people either aren't interested or don't really have something that they want to, do that with.
Yeah.
So the way to sustain a really robust experience for children in a small school is through partnerships, and making sure that you can maintain partnerships over the continuum, right? So it's not partnerships just for the sake of partnerships are not useful.
Yeah.
But if you have touchstone partnerships, people who really understand the vision and mission of your school and who have in equal collaboration come together with the school team to develop ideas over time and revisit them and revise them and protect and improve them so that they can really become embedded into the footprint of the school, that is a very meaningful thing for schools. And that is the way that I work my partnerships. So I don't have a lot of partnerships, but the ones that I do have been here forever. Like, they helped found the school, and, together we figure out how to find grants every year to keep them in the school. And we keep revisiting and building upon the work of previous years, which then strengthens the programs because students can move through them vertically and get better at them also, right?
Yeah.
So the kids get more than one try. The other thing that I really try to do with my partnerships is, a lot of people use their partnerships for after school. I use my partnerships for day school because I have one of my partnerships is actually a comprehensive after school program. And so they're already providing a really excellent wide array of things that are happening after school. And there's certain partnerships that I'll put there because it's the appropriate place to do that. But the things that I really believe that every child should experience, I put in the day program, because if it's not part of the day program, students can opt out, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to especially arts and especially the performing arts, that's often something that only a very small group of kids in any school will participate in, right? It's like the theater kids, the band kids. It's a very small percentage of the school. And if you have a small school, that is a teeny tiny dot in your school. But this idea of, do you know how to present your thoughts? Like, can you speak to your thoughts? Can you share your truth? Can you do it in a way that is both compelling and also appropriate for the context, right? Sometimes it's appropriate to use the F word with your audience because that's what's going to land your marks. But then there are other audiences where if you do that, like, that's really a problem. And that's the only thing people will take away with it, right? So helping children negotiate how to kind of grow into their own voice, I think, is a very important tool. And we've spoken about this before, Damon. It's not about, often that's going to be a disaster in middle school. Like, kids are going to hate it. They're going to go into it kicking and screaming. They're going to complain. Ms. Latier, why do you make us do this every year? This is the worst thing. They drive my teachers crazy.
Or
But the
they're going to bring their own material to the table and it's going to be completely inappropriate.
Right. But the reality is, what we're doing is, this is their starting place for building capacity here. And each time they pass through this journey, they're going to get better at it. It's going to feel a little more comfortable, and it will pay dividends in the long run. It may be in a job interview 10 years later. It may in college, where they finally feel, enough confidence in their own skin to stand up and be part of social activism or, public speaking. It could be something that they find in high school. But if we don't start giving them that power now and building capacity now, they won't have it. And that will change the course of how they move through their life. I don't think we can shy away from teaching children how to tell their story in a respectful and compelling way so people will hear them. And if we look at the context of America and how necessary it is right now for people to speak their truth and people to hear other people's truths and learn how to be in that space, we're really facing, some critical things in the future if we don't give those skills to our children. So that's a big piece of our partnership work. And I think every child needs it. And so every child gets it here, whether they want it or not. And I think in the long run, it's been very beneficial for my students.
You're so freaking incredible in everything that you do. Your email says, let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. Lakota Chief Sitting Bull. Where is that from? I mean, obviously it's Lakota Chief Sitting Bull. How did you come upon that?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the wolf conversation.
Yes.
Right. So I think that some of the best philosophy around how to care for communities comes from Native American kind of tropes, right? I am not an expert on Native Americans. I am not, I have no lineage with Native Americans. I'm not trying to culturally appropriate any of these things, but I do think that there are lessons to be learned, and there are voices that we have not listened to.
Yes.
that give us wisdom. And I've always found Native Americans and their stories to be something that felt like a touchstone to me and a wise guide. And so that particular quote, I think, speaks to a lot of what I've been talking about through this whole conversation, and certainly what the wolf represents, right? School is not about reading, writing, and arithmetic. School is about helping children build their future. We are just guides for them. We are just facilitators of their learning. You can't force people to learn what they don't want to learn. You can invite them. You can guide them, right? You can keep asking them to the table, and and give them messages of confidence and empowerment and can do, and hope that as they pass through, they will get to a better place. Now, I've been very fortunate, and now, like we said earlier, I've been doing this for 20 years now. Enough of my students have made it through to the other side that I have enough anecdotal evidence to be like, okay, this does pay off. Like some students, like I can think of one child in particular. I remember him rolling around on the floor of my classroom regularly, right? And nobody wanted to teach this kid. I loved him. I thought he was really, really bright, but he had ants in his pants, and he didn't really buy into the structures and systems of school. And, he had a lot of reasons not to. And now he's a teacher and a good one, and he's doing great work, and, really, really part of the conversation around culturally responsive education, because that was his big criticism of school when he was in it. And like I said, I agree. You know, he was one of the children who was put in my class because nobody wanted to deal with him. And now he's paying that forward. And I have enough stories like that where, you know, it's like, even though kids were kicking and screaming or really difficult during this time in their lives, because it is a difficult time in anyone's life, they made it through. And the seeds that we planted and the opportunities that we gave them did have an impact. You know, not everyone's going to be a NASA astronaut. Not everybody's going to be an NYU doctor. You know, what we're hoping for is that everyone becomes the best version of themselves and a good person who believes in what they're doing and lives the life that they choose in the best way that they can. That's all we can do. We're not here to judge anybody. And who's to say that one thing is better than the other?
You couldn't have said it better. I've taken up a lot of your time. It's what is
I think it's
3:30.
yeah, 3:30.
No.
So, but
You came from a family of educators, didn't you?
no, I did not. So that's no.
Amanda told me that, and that was totally wrong.
No. My husband came from a family of educators. So
Okay.
the Canadian side of my family, they were all educators. I had one relative that was an educator. It was my Aunt Madge, who lived next door. And she was a very important person in my life. As a matter of fact, I've been talking about her a lot lately, my Aunt Madge. She was great. She always had something interesting for me to do. She was an English teacher, but she was also the home ec teacher at the high school. So she taught cooking and sewing. And so whenever I went over there was something interesting to do. And she always let me do stuff that, like, you know, like if your mom's in a rush and she doesn't want the kitchen to be dirty, you don't get to cook. But like Aunt Madge would let you cook. Aunt Madge would teach you how to sew. Aunt Madge would let you make your own clothes, even if they were like super wide leg striped bell bottom pants, right? And she would be like totally okay with that, you know, and she would empower you and show you how to do it, because for her, that was really the conversation. But other than Aunt Madge, and Aunt Madge was well retired by the time like I was growing up, because she was my mother's aunt. So she was like a peer. She was like my grandparents' age, right? So I never knew her as a teacher. I just really liked to be around her because she was a cool lady. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of love for teachers.
Not for teachers.
In my upbringing, it wasn't a thing.
There is one other question I have, which was devices. I know that computers, you've made a big, a lot of the Fort Greene prep students have computers, and you've made that a big priority.
Yeah.
Digital stuff. What was it like the last year and a half?
Well, I mean, you know, when the whole city is shut down, the only way you can connect is through a computer, right? So we did everything that we could to make sure that there was not a digital divide where some students had opportunity and the others didn't. I would say that we were successful in getting devices and internet to all students. However, I don't think that online learning solely is sustainable for children. I think that, you know, I am completely on board with a full reopening. I think we can do it safely. I think everybody just has to be in it together and community minded. We learned a lot over the course of a year. We used first of all, we're very, very fortunate because I have a wonderful teacher, my colleague that I've been working with for 20 years, you know, Sarani.
Ms. Muller.
Yeah, she's extraordinary. And, she really made a lot of this possible. She's like, we need this, we need that. Like, this is what we're going to do. Train people in this. So like, she was really pivotal in like cheering everybody on and helping even like our not tech savvy
Yeah.
folks, get on board. And then there's a couple of other key people on staff that were really tech savvy that helped get the staff up to speed. And we learned over time that we had to, in some way, shape, or form, replicate engagement. Like, we had to get kids to engage again. And so we purchased this software called Nearpod, which basically converts like your standard Google slide deck, your Google presentation, Google Slides,
Yeah.
Google, whatever it's called. And it converts it into an interactive experience. And it could either be a student-paced interactive experience or a teacher-paced interactive experience. And so they have things like you could do a collaboration board where everybody writes on a Post-it note virtually and sticks it up there, or you put up some other kind of wall, things like, and then we would use things like Jamboard or Padlet or ways to get students to have these silent conversations that you would do in a class with big paper. And we used the breakout rooms a lot. We used all of those tools. And I think that for students that were already bought in to staying in the virtual classroom, and some kids checked out and there really wasn't much we could do to get them back.
Yeah.
We were in touch with them every day. We talked to them. We knew they were safe. We gave them assignments, but they just didn't want to engage on the platform. But for those who were there, and I would say that was about 75% of our students consistently,
Mm-hmm.
We got an okay result. I think we got the best result we could for what we were trying to do. But in no way, shape, or form does it replace
No.
in-person learning. And I think that, earlier in the conversation, we talked about, giving opportunities to kids and putting them in these situations where everybody has to do something, even if they don't want to. You can't do that on the computer. It's too easy to hide. It's too easy to be passive because it feels like we're watching TV.
Well, you can shut your screen off and you can
Shut your
mute
screen
yourself.
off. You could leave and nobody would even know. You could.
My Wi-Fi went out.
Well, or
I'm
you could
sorry.
just diminish the screen and be doing something else, because staff does it too.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, yeah, I'm talking to you and you can see my picture, but I'm really doing this over here. And so I think that there's an accountability when we're face to face, seeing each other and in the same space and in it together, that feels really different. And I really hope that as a community, what we take away from this is, yes, there are really good technology tools. We will continue using them this year with kids in the classroom. Being paperless is good. It's easier to organize, I think, when you kind of set up these virtual archives rather than trying to carry binders or folders or whatever. So there's a real use for it. But we have to find a way to start becoming a community again. We have to find a way to be able to sit next to people and to have different opinions and still be able to share space and find common ground and find a pathway forward, find, a way to get to the other side. And I think we're really in danger of making it really easy to continue to disconnect, ignore, segregate, separate, all of those things. I think this virtual platform just exacerbates. So I'm not a fan.
There was a very prescient line in Same River by Strike Anywhere, which was all of us gathered together in this same space, sharing each other's respiration, which is not really possible now with COVID.
Yeah.
But it was missed when I was teaching there.
Yeah. So, let's hope we get to the other side of this. But
We
everybody,
will.
everybody's got to be in it, and everybody's not in it yet. So, here's looking forward to for the strays to rejoin the pack. Okay, but we should do this more often. Let's make this not once in a decade kind of thing.
I'm down for that.
All right, stay safe and well, my friend.
Thank you. You as well.
Talk to you soon.
Give my love to your students.
I will.
They all hate me.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
You're that math teacher. Trust me. Bye.
Ciao.